Welcome to the reading of the Sabbath School lesson for the second quarter of 2022. Welcome to Lesson 11 from the series on Genesis. It's titled Joseph, Master of Dreams, and is ready for teaching on June 11. And I'm Percy Harrold. Friday, June 10. From the book Education, written by Ellen G. White, pages 51 and 52, we read, "In early life, just as they were passing from youth to manhood, Joseph and Daniel were separated from their homes and carried as captives to heathen lands. Especially was Joseph subject to the temptations that attend great changes of fortune. In his father's home, a tenderly cherished child. In the house of Potiphar, a slave. Then a confidant and a companion, a man of affairs, educated by study, observation, contact with men. In Pharaoh's dungeon, a prisoner of state, condemned unjustly, without hope of vindication or prospect of release. Called at a great crisis to the leadership of the nation. What enabled him to preserve his integrity? In his childhood, Joseph had been taught the love and fear of God. Often in his father's tent under the Syrian stars, he had been told the story of the night vision at Bethel, of the ladder from heaven to earth, and of the descending and ascending angels, and of him who from the throne above revealed himself to Jacob. He had been told the story of the conflict beside the Jabbok, when, renouncing cherished sins, Jacob stood conqueror and received the title of a prince with God. A shepherd boy tending his father's flocks, Joseph's pure and simple life had favoured the development of both physical and mental power. By communion with God through nature and the study of the great truths handed down as a sacred trust from father to son, he had gained strength of mind and firmness of principle. In the crisis of his life, when making that terrible journey from his childhood home in Canaan to the bondage which awaited him in Egypt, looking for the last time on the hills that hid the tents of his kindred, Joseph remembered his father's God. He remembered the lessons of his childhood, and his soul thrilled with the resolve to prove himself true, even to act as became a subject of the King of Heaven." End of quote. And that brings us to our two discussion questions for this week. 1. Compare Joseph with Daniel and Jesus. What are their common points? How do Joseph and Daniel, in their own ways, reveal aspects of what Jesus would be like? And 2. Talk about the question at the end of Thursday's study. How do we learn to trust God when things don't turn out as well for us as they did eventually for Joseph? Inside Story. Our mission story this week is titled An Eternal Gift, and it's by Andrew McChesney. Tragedy struck young Vashalini's life when her parents divorced over a misunderstanding in the extended family. Vishalini sadly said goodbye to mother after father gained custody of her. Before long, father remarried and Vishalini had a stepmother. Vishalini felt so alone. Her new stepmother did not like mother at all. Vishalini deeply loved mother, and she looked forward to her occasional visits. The girl would smile and give mother a big hug. Mother also smiled and gave Vishalini a big hug. Mother often had something else for the girl as well. She brought gifts. "Here is something for you," mother would say, pressing tasty treats into her little hand. Vishalini smiled happily. She liked gifts and she liked tasty treats, but before she could eat them, her stepmother often snatched them away. "You are not allowed to accept any of her gifts," her stepmother said sharply. Vishalini felt so alone. She grew up into a teenager and father sent her away to study at a boarding school in another part of Tamil Nadu state. It was scary to leave home for the first time, but Vishalini was glad to be away from family tensions and to be among friendly children and teachers. As the weeks passed, she became especially interested in hearing about someone whom the children called the real God. She wanted to know more, and she began to learn about Jesus. Today, Vishalini calls Jesus her friend and says she will never feel alone again. Why? Because Jesus has promised, "And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age," in Matthew 28, verse 20. Vishalini has one gift that no one can ever take away. Thank you for your 13th Sabbath offering that helped construct a new girls' dormitory at Vishalini's school, James Memorial Higher Secondary School in Tamil Nadu state in southeastern India. The new dormitory allowed Vishalini and the other girls to move out of a dilapidated building that no longer was a healthy place to live. And there's a beautiful photo of Vishalini here with her smile and long plaits. This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind, and It Is Written. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. Remember, God is always faithful.